"The inheritance, please go slow," Nathaniel cautioned, his weathered hand steadying Theodora's elbow as they navigated the crumbling stone steps. "These stairs haven't welcomed visitors in decades," Theodora Blake nodded, her chestnut hair tumbling across her shoulders as she gazed up at Willowmere, the grand Victorian mansion that now, inexplicably, belonged to her. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through a canopy of ancient oaks, casting dappled shadows across the property's overgrown gardens. "I still don't understand," she murmured, more to herself than to the peculiar caretaker who had met her at the rusted gates. "I'd never even heard of my grandmother Evelyn until the lawyer called. My father never mentioned her." Nathaniel's expression remained carefully neutral. "Family histories can be complicated, Miss Blake." At 32, Theodora had built a predictable life as a conservator at a small museum in Philadelphia. When the letter arrived informing her of both a grandmother's existence and her death, along with the inheritance of an estate she'd never known about, she had nearly dismissed it as a scam. Yet here she stood, keys in hand, facing a mystery that had apparently been waiting for her all along. The foyer welcomed them with the scent of old books and lavender. Despite decades of neglect, Willowmere retained an undeniable elegance, ornate moldings, sweeping staircases, and everywhere curious astronomical instruments that seem both antique and somehow beyond modern understanding. "Did you know her well?" Theodora asked, trailing her fingers along a brass armillary sphere that dominated the entrance hall. Nathaniel hesitated, something flashing in his deep-set eyes that Theodora couldn't quite place. "I've been caretaker here for quite some time. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman, a scientist, though few understood her work." "What kind of science?" "Time," he answered simply, as though that explained everything. "She studied its peculiarities." Theodora followed him through rooms draped in dust cloths, trying to reconcile this grand, mysterious place with her understanding of her family. Her father, now 5 years deceased, had been a practical accountant who disdained imagination and excess. How could he have come from this place of wonder and secrets? In the library, Nathaniel pulled back heavy velvet curtains, releasing clouds of dust that danced in the sudden streams of light. Theodora gasped. The circular room rose 3 stories, with a glass dome ceiling that revealed the darkening sky above. Books lined every wall, interspersed with maps of stars and strange diagrams. This was her sanctuary, Nathaniel said softly, where she conducted most of her research. Theodora approached a massive oak desk at the center of the room. Upon it sat a leather-bound journal, a fountain pen resting diagonally across its cover as though its owner had just stepped away momentarily. "Is this her final journal?" Nathaniel confirmed. "She wanted you to have it. To understand, but why me? Why not my father?" The caretaker turned toward the window, his silhouette outlined against the sunset. "Your father chose a different path. But you—" He turned, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "She always said you would come when the time was right." "That's impossible. She never met me." Nathaniel smiled enigmatically. "Time works differently at Willowmere, Miss Blake. Your grandmother understood that better than anyone." As if punctuating his statement, the grandfather clock in the hall began to chime, though Theodora realized with a start that its hands pointed to an hour that didn't match the chimes, or the actual time. "You should rest," Nathaniel suggested, moving toward the door. "The East Suite has been prepared for you. Tomorrow will be illuminating." After he departed, Theodora sank into the desk chair, her fingers hovering over the journal. Outside, the first stars appeared through the glass dome, and within the walls of Willowmere, she could have sworn she heard whispers, echoes of conversations long past or perhaps not yet begun. She opened the journal to its first page, where a single line was written in elegant script. "When you arrived, I knew it was you by your eyes, my eyes, though we'd never met in this time." Theodora Blake looked up at her reflection in a nearby mirror, at the unusual amber eyes that had always made her stand out. Her grandmother's eyes, apparently, and somewhere in this house of mysteries, answers awaited. Shadows in the library. Theodora spent her third consecutive night in the library, surrounded by stacks of her grandmother Evelyn's journals. Sleep had become secondary to the revelations within these pages. Theories about temporal physics that seemed decades ahead of their time, observations of chronological aberrations on the estate grounds, and most disturbing of all, repeated references to Theodora herself. March 18, 1973, she read aloud, her voice barely a whisper in the vast circular room. She appeared again today by the willow near the pond. My granddaughter with my eyes, though she hasn't been born yet. She spoke of Philadelphia and artifacts. I dare not approach too closely. The temporal consequences could be catastrophic. A soft knock interrupted her reading. Nathaniel entered carrying a silver tray with tea and sandwiches, his expression softening as he surveyed the chaos of her research. "You haven't slept," he observed. Clearing space on a side table, how could I? Theodora gestured to the journals. According to these, my grandmother repeatedly saw me here at Willowmere throughout her life, decades before I was born. And there's more. She held up a photograph she'd discovered pressed between pages, herself in clothing she didn't own, standing beside a willow tree she hadn't yet visited. Nathaniel sighed, lowering himself into a leather armchair. In the firelight, he looked both younger and immeasurably older than she'd initially thought. I wondered when we'd have this conversation. What's happening here, Nathaniel? Who are you, really? He ran a hand through his dark hair, shot through with silver at the temples. I've been caretaker at Willowmere for 47 years by my personal chronology. Though in the world's timeline, that's impossible. You'd be ancient. Time works differently here, he replied, echoing his earlier statement. Your grandmother discovered it accidentally through her astronomical research. Certain convergences of celestial bodies create what she called temporal wells on this property. Moments where past, present, and future overlap. Theodora's scientific mind rebelled against the notion, even as the evidence mounted. And you? How are you involved? Nathaniel's gaze dropped to his teacup. I was her research assistant in 1978. During an experiment, I became untethered. I exist somewhat adjacent to normal time now. I age but slowly, and I'm bound to Willowmere. That's why my father never spoke of this place, Theodora realized. He couldn't accept what happened here. William was 14 when he witnessed one of Evelyn's experiments go wrong. He saw things no child should see. His mother appearing at multiple ages simultaneously, objects phasing in and out of existence. He left and never returned. Nathaniel's voice grew soft with old sorrow. He forbade Evelyn from ever contacting you. Theodora processed this revelation about her stoic, rational father. But in these journals, she writes about seeing me here throughout her life. Yes, once you inherited Willowmere, it was inevitable. The estate exists in a complex temporal relationship with you now. Your past, present, and future are woven into its foundations. A chill ran through Theodora. Am I trapped here? No, Nathaniel assured her quickly. But Willowmere is now part of your story, and there's something your grandmother wanted you to find. He stood, moving to a star chart on the wall. With practiced movements, he aligned the constellations in a specific pattern, and a soft click echoed through the room. A hidden panel swung open in the bookshelf, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. This leads to her private workshop, Nathaniel explained, and to the Garden of Hours, but we must proceed carefully. Time is unstable there. A wrong step could send you years in either direction. The grandfather clock in the hall struck 3, though dawn was already breaking through the glass dome above. Please go slow, Nathaniel warned, offering his hand. The temporal currents can disorient you. Their fingers touched, and Theodora felt a strange electricity between them, as though their timelines were communicating in some fundamental, molecular way. As they descended the hidden staircase, the air grew thick with possibility, and she could have sworn she heard her grandmother's voice whispering encouragement from somewhere both very far away and impossibly close. The Garden of Hours. The staircase opened onto a vast greenhouse attached to the mansion's eastern wing, completely hidden from outside view by clever architectural design and the overgrown grounds. But what grew inside defied all natural laws. Flowers bloomed and withered in minutes. Trees cycled through seasons in opposing corners of the room, and at the center, a circular reflecting pool rippled with water that flowed both forward and backward. "The Garden of Hours," Nathaniel said reverently. "Your grandmother's masterpiece?" Theodora stood transfixed as a nearby rosebush sprouted buds that bloomed into magnificent crimson flowers, withered, died, and regenerated, all within the span of a few minutes. "How is this possible?" "The entire greenhouse exists at a temporal intersection," Nathaniel explained, guiding her along a winding stone path. "Different areas experience time at different rates and sometimes in different directions. Evelyn discovered that certain plants could survive these conditions, evolve with them even. As they ventured deeper, Theodora noticed peculiar instruments positioned throughout the garden, brass devices with spinning dials, crystal pendulums that swung in impossible patterns, mirrors that reflected scenes from different time periods. She was mapping the temporal currents, Nathaniel said, following her gaze, trying to understand the rules governing this anomaly. They reached the central pool, where the water swirled in hypnotic patterns. Leaning over, Theodora gasped. Her reflection showed not her current self, but versions of her at different ages, rippling and shifting like paintings coming to life. "The Chronos Mirror," Nathaniel murmured. "It shows potential timelines, pasts and futures that might have been or might yet be. Is that why my grandmother could see me before I was born?" "Because of this place?" Nathaniel nodded. "The first time you appeared to her, she was terrified. But as she understood more about Willowmere's nature, she realized what it meant, that someday you would inherit her work." In one corner of the garden stood a massive willow tree, the one from the photograph. Unlike the other plants, it remained stable, unchanging amidst the temporal chaos surrounding it. "The anchor tree," Nathaniel explained. "It exists at all points in Willowmere's timeline simultaneously. Your grandmother theorized it's what keeps the estate from complete temporal dissolution." As Theodora approached it, her head swam with sudden disorientation. For a moment, she saw the garden as it had been decades earlier, meticulously maintained, filled with research equipment, and there, working among the plants, a woman with familiar amber eyes. "Grandmother?" she whispered. The vision vanished as quickly as it had appeared, but the encounter left Theodora breathless. She turned to find Nathaniel watching her with concern. "You saw her, didn't you?" he asked softly. Theodora nodded, unable to speak. "It happens near the anchor tree, brief glimpses across time." His expression grew troubled. "But we should be careful. The longer we stay, the more the garden affects us. Your grandmother believed prolonged exposure could cause a person to become temporally untethered like you," Theodora finished. Something vulnerable crossed his face. "Yes, though my condition is unique. I was directly involved in the experiment that went wrong." As they continued exploring, Theodora realized Nathaniel was showing her not just a scientific marvel, but a deeply personal history. In a sheltered alcove, they discovered a small desk where her grandmother had written many of her observations. Among the papers lay a device resembling an ornate pocket watch. "The chronometer," Nathaniel said, "Evelyn's most sophisticated invention. She believed it could not only measure temporal distortions but potentially navigate them." Theodora picked it up carefully, feeling its gentle vibration against her palm. As their investigation deepened, so too did the connection between them. Nathaniel's knowledge of her grandmother created an intimacy that transcended their short acquaintance, as though she'd known him across multiple timelines. When evening fell, at least in the outside world, they returned to the mansion proper. In the kitchen, they prepared a simple meal together, their conversation flowing easily despite the extraordinary circumstances. "Were you close to her?" Theodora asked as they sat before the library fireplace, wine glasses in hand. Nathaniel's expression softened. "She saved me in every way a person can be saved. After the accident, when I became unstuck from normal time, she dedicated years to finding a way to stabilize me. Eventually, she succeeded, partially. I'm bound to Willowmere, but at least I exist in a mostly linear fashion now. You loved her, Theodora observed, not jealously but with understanding. As a mentor, as family, he clarified. Evelyn was brilliant, driven. She sacrificed much for her research. A shadow crossed his face, including her relationship with your father. Later that night, as Theodora drifted to sleep in the East Suite, she dreamed of moving through the mansion across different decades, seeing her grandmother at different ages, watching Nathaniel remain almost unchanged, and strangest of all, glimpsing herself as both a child and an old woman, walking these same halls as though they had always been her home. Echoes of yesterday. The discovery came unexpectedly during their second week of research. While translating her grandmother's later journals, filled with increasingly complex equations and diagrams, Theodora found a folded paper containing explicit instructions. To my granddaughter, when the Perseid meteor shower aligns with the summer solstice, the temporal well at Willowmere reaches maximum permeability. Stand beneath the glass dome at precisely 12:17 a.m. with the chronometer in hand. You will see what I could never reach. That's tonight, Nathaniel said, checking the astronomical calendar on the library wall. The rare convergence Evelyn predicted. As midnight approached, they prepared the library according to the detailed instructions. Theodora positioned herself under the glass dome, while Nathaniel adjusted various instruments around the room. The air hummed with anticipation, as though Willowmere itself were holding its breath. "Are you certain about this?" Nathaniel asked, concern evident in his voice. "Your grandmother's experiments were theoretical. There's no way to know what will happen." "I need to understand," Theodora replied, clutching the chronometer. Its intricate hands were spinning wildly now, responding to the building temporal pressure. At 12:17 precisely, the meteor shower peaked overhead. Streaks of celestial light flashed across the night sky as the chronometer in Theodora's hand began to glow with an unearthly blue luminescence. The very air around her seemed to crystallize, fragmenting into shimmering facets like a kaleidoscope. "Nathaniel!" she called out, suddenly afraid, but her voice sounded distorted as though traveling through water. Before he could reach her, the world dissolved. Theodora felt herself pulled apart and reassembled in the same space, but not the same time. The library remained, but transformed. Gone were the dust covers and neglect. Bright electric lights illuminated polished shelves and modern research equipment. At the central desk sat an elderly woman with familiar amber eyes, writing intensely in a leather journal. "Grandmother?" Theodora whispered. Evelyn Blake looked up unsurprised. "You came," she smiled warmly. "Though you're early in your timeline. I was expecting an older version of you." Theodora approached cautiously. "How are you speaking to me? Am I in the past?" "A version of it," Evelyn explained, setting down her pen. "Willowmere exists at a temporal crossroads. What you're experiencing is a pocket of my past that has remained accessible due to the work I conducted here." For hours they talked, grandmother and granddaughter meeting across time. Evelyn explained the true purpose of her research, not merely to understand time, but to find a way to navigate it. "There are moments in our lives that act as hinges," she told Theodora. "Points where everything changes. I believed if we could revisit those moments, not to change them, but to fully understand them, we might live more completely. Is that why I'm here now? To understand something?" Evelyn's expression grew serious. "You're here because Willowmere chose you just as it once chose me. But there's danger in what I've created. The temporal wells are becoming unstable. Eventually they'll collapse. What happens then? This pocket of time will disappear, along with anyone trapped within it." She took Theodora's hands. "Including Nathaniel," understanding dawned. "That's why he's bound to the estate. He's actually trapped in one of these temporal pockets. Yes, my greatest success and my deepest regret." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. "I stabilized him, but I couldn't fully free him. For decades I searched for a solution, but time ran out for me. But not for me," Theodora realized. Before she could learn more, the air began to shimmer again. The chronometer vibrated violently in her pocket. "You're being pulled back," Evelyn said urgently. "Listen carefully. The solution is in my final equations, the unfinished work in the journal you found. The key is understanding that time isn't linear but concurrent. All moments exist simultaneously. As the library began to dissolve around her, Evelyn called out one last message. The anchor points must be synchronized. Both temporal coordinates must align willingly. Theodora returned to her present with a violent jolt, collapsing onto the library floor. Nathaniel rushed to her side, his face pale with worry. "You disappeared," he said hoarsely. "Completely. For 3 days I've been searching the grounds, the garden, everywhere." 3 days? Theodora struggled to sit up. "I was only gone for hours." As she recounted her experience, Nathaniel's expression shifted from concern to wonder to something like fragile hope. "She found a way," he whispered. "After all these years." That night, as they pored over Evelyn's final journal with new understanding, their hands brushed together. The simple contact sent a shiver of temporal recognition through them both, as though their timelines were reaching for each other across the constraints that separated them. "If we succeed," Theodora said quietly, "you'll be free of Willowmere, free to go anywhere, anytime." Nathaniel looked up, his eyes reflecting decades of solitude and waiting. "There was a time when that was all I wanted." He hesitated. "Now, I'm not so certain." Their gazes held, and in that moment, Theodora understood that some connections transcended time itself. The slow dance of time. Summer waned into autumn as Theodora and Nathaniel worked tirelessly to decipher Evelyn's final equations. The task required both Nathaniel's intimate knowledge of her earlier work and Theodora's fresh perspective as a conservator, accustomed to reconstructing fragmented histories. They established a rhythm, days spent in research and evenings spent sharing the simple pleasures of cooking, conversation, and gradually cautious touches that lingered longer each time. For Nathaniel, who had lived decades in temporal isolation, these moments held a sweetness he had forgotten could exist. "What will you do?" Theodora asked one evening as they sat beneath the willow tree, watching the sunset paint the overgrown gardens in gold. "If we succeed in freeing you from the temporal pocket?" Nathaniel considered the question that had haunted him for years. "I hardly remember the world outside Willowmere anymore. It will be unfamiliar." What remained unspoken hung between them, that his freedom might mean their separation. The paradox of their situation wasn't lost on either of them. The very research bringing them closer might ultimately drive them apart. As the autumn equinox approached, they made their breakthrough. The solution, as Evelyn had hinted, lay in understanding time not as a river flowing in one direction, but as an ocean with currents moving in multiple directions simultaneously. The chronometer doesn't just measure temporal distortions, Theodora realized, examining the device under specialized equipment they'd assembled. It creates a personal temporal field around its user. "A bubble of stabilized time," Nathaniel agreed. "But Evelyn could never make it powerful enough to counteract Willowmere's influence completely." "Because she was working alone," Theodora said, excitement building. Her notes mentioned synchronized anchor points. What if that means 2 chronometers working in tandem? In Evelyn's workshop beneath the library, they discovered a second unfinished chronometer. Working day and night, they completed it according to the final diagrams in her journal. The procedure required materials with precise temporal resonance, metals that had existed in the house across multiple time periods, crystals that had grown in the Garden of Hours. As the equinox arrived, bringing another astronomical convergence, they prepared for the attempt. The glass dome of the library was opened fully to the night sky, and both chronometers placed on the central desk, calibrated to each other. "If this works," Theodora said, the gravity of the moment settling between them, "the temporal pocket trapping you will collapse. You'll exist fully in the present timeline." "And Willowmere?" Nathaniel asked, glancing around at the house that had been his prison and sanctuary for so long. "The estate will stabilize into a single time stream. The Garden of Hours will likely return to normal space-time." She hesitated. "We'll lose the ability to glimpse other times." The unspoken implication hung heavy. They would lose the magical quality that had brought them together, becoming just an ordinary woman and man in an ordinary if extraordinary house. As midnight approached, they positioned themselves on either side of the desk, hands hovering over their respective chronometers. "Are you certain?" Nathaniel asked. "Once done, it cannot be undone. All the wonder and impossibility of what Evelyn created will be preserved in our memories and her research," Theodora finished. "But you deserve to be free, Nathaniel. To choose your own path." His eyes held hers across the desk. "And if my chosen path is with you?" The question lingered between them as the astronomical alignment reached its peak. Together they activated the chronometers. Light flowed between the devices, building into a luminous column that extended through the dome and into the night sky. The air thrummed with power as decades of temporal distortion began to unravel. Throughout Willowmere, time rippled and realigned. In the Garden of Hours, plants settled into normal growth patterns. In the library, books once showing different publication dates on different days stabilized into consistent versions. At the center of it all, Nathaniel gasped as the temporal boundaries that had held him partially out of phase with normal time dissolved. For the first time in 47 years, he existed fully in a single moment, anchored not to Willowmere, but to himself. When the light faded, they stood in a transformed library. The room felt different, smaller perhaps, but more real. Outside, dawn was breaking over gardens that, while still beautiful, now followed the ordinary rules of nature. Theodora moved around the desk and extended her hand to Nathaniel. "How does it feel?" He took her hand, marveling at the simple contact that now felt different, clearer, more present. Like waking from a long dream. In the weeks that followed, they discovered what remained of Willowmere's mysteries. The mansion was still extraordinary, still filled with Evelyn's brilliant research and inventions, but no longer supernatural. The temporal wells had closed, leaving behind only faint echoes detectable by the chronometers. Nathaniel struggled at times, adjusting to a world that had advanced decades beyond his memories. Simple technologies confused him. Cultural references mystified him. But Theodora was patient, guiding him through his reintegration with the same care he had once shown her when introducing the mysteries of Willowmere. As winter descended, bringing with it the first snow to blanket the estate, they stood together on the veranda. Nathaniel, now free to leave Willowmere for the first time in decades, had chosen to stay. "I've been thinking about what your grandmother told you," he said, watching snowflakes drift onto the gardens. "About moments that act as hinges in our lives." Theodora nodded, understanding completely. Her decision to accept the inheritance, to unlock Willowmere's secrets, had forever altered her path. "I think perhaps the most important discovery isn't about manipulating time," Nathaniel continued, turning to face her. "It's about recognizing which moments deserve to be lived fully." As he drew her closer, their breaths mingling in the cold air, Theodora thought of her grandmother's words about living more completely. Not by changing the past or glimpsing the future, but by being fully present in the moments that mattered most. "Please go slow," she whispered, as his lips neared hers, not in hesitation, but in recognition of the precious nature of time when it's savored rather than spent. In the grand library, carefully preserved behind glass, Evelyn Blake's journals remained as testament to a woman who had glimpsed the true nature of time. And among them, a photograph, now seemingly impossible, of her granddaughter standing beneath a willow tree decades before she was born, proof that some connections transcend the boundaries of what we think we understand about the universe. For Theodora and Nathaniel, freed from temporal constraints but bound by something far more powerful, the greatest adventure wasn't exploring the mysteries of time, it was building a future together, one ordinary, extraordinary moment at a time.